leftovers, or the DMV,
Number 97,
or house cleaning, or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Fans of the hit TV show Scandal can now revisit every episode on Unpacking the Toolbox, a Scandal Rewatch podcast, hosted by the cast members behind Quinn Perkins and Huck. So, gladiators, grab some Gettysburger and relive Scandal's most iconic OMG moments.
We would be in like 110 degrees in a wool coat.
Yep.
I mean, the chafing that was going on in my pencil skirts, I deserve all the acting awards, people.
Listen to Unpacking the Toolbox, a Scandal Rewatch podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Alphabet Boys is a new podcast series that goes inside undercover investigations. In the first season, we're diving into an FBI investigation of the 2020 protests. It involves a cigar-smoking mystery man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
But are federal agents catching bad guys or creating them?
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi there, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
We're real-life best friends, but we met playing fake-life best friends, Turk and JD, on the sitcom Scrubs.
20 years later, we've decided to rewatch the series one episode at a time and put our memories into a podcast you can listen to at home.
We're going to get all our special guest friends like Sarah Chalk, John C. McGinley, Neil Flynn, Judy Reyes.
Show creator Bill Lawrence, editors, writers, and even prop masters will tell us about what inspired the series and how we became a family.
You can listen to the podcast Fake Doctors, Real Friends with Zach and Donald on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
This is the Jabberjaw Podcast Network.
No algorithm has ever jammed out to its favorite song, dreamed of starting a band, or watched its favorite movie 100 times, or even watched a single movie for that matter, which is why an algorithm has no business picking the films that you watch. Mubi is a curated online cinema streaming exceptional films from around the world. Each day, they introduce a new hand-picked gem, and you have 1 month to watch it. Whether it's a forgotten classic, a festival darling, or a groundbreaking masterpiece, every single film is hand-selected by experts. Try Mubi for free. That's MUBI.com/words. And you will love this thing. This has changed my life in the most positive way. You get amazing cinema. Such good stuff. That, like, I love movies, and it shows me stuff that I'm like, yo, I've never even heard of this. And I watch it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So please, 30 days for free. Mubi.com, MUBI.com/words, 30 days for free. All right, now on to the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Words or Less, the podcast. I am your ever-present host, Ray Harkins, talking to people involved in independent music, whether that's playing in bands, running record labels, doing zines, bunch of stuff, as long as you are contributing, or if you have taken these awesome principles that we learn in and around the hardcore and punk scene and indie rock scene and just independent music in general, and then apply them to your life and become, interesting culturally. And that's why you're on this show. I don't know why I always like to put that sort of preamble there, but I just, it's a nice framing of the context of the people that we have on the show. So today's show is this was intensely awesome. This is a person I've known for a very long time and was excited to have him on the show. James Hart, he's the vocalist for 18 Visions, and he also sang for a band for quite some time called Burn Halo. That was more of the, sort of active rock and roll sort of scenario. And 18 Visions looms large in my own personal life just because Taken used to play a ton with 18 Visions and knew all the members really well, and James was always a supremely interesting person because he was kind of the focal point for a lot of, both positive and negative things in regards to the hardcore scene as far as, whether it was straight edge or whether it was people's opinions and, scene drama and all that stuff that kind of, happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. But James, to me, has always been an incredibly kind and caring person. He's always been nothing but cool to me. And I was excited to have him on the show because we get real deep, man. This is a long conversation, so strap yourself in. But let's get some core pleasantries out of the way. The fundamentals of what make this show tick is a website called noecho.net. You can go visit them and get a bunch of rad interviews and content related to the punk and hardcore scene. And they've been doing a ton of debuts recently from song premieres and all that sort of stuff, like the new live Strife that's coming out. They just did a premiere for that. It's great stuff. So please visit that site. It's a marriage made in heaven. And then, you can email the show, 100wordspodcast@gmail.com. And I also would encourage you to, you hear ads in the show, right? And that is an incredibly important part to me because not only obviously am I making money off this thing, but it shows that these companies find value in independent music and the discussions around it. And the more ads we get from that perspective, I get, just show a vote of confidence, not only in the medium of podcasting, but then also the specific content that this show travels in. So please, I only agree to the stuff that makes total sense for you as a listener. Stuff that I've found cool that I'm like, hey man, I've tried this out. This is rad. So please, be a good patron, because I don't ask for money. I'm not, starting, I did a Patreon a long time ago, but I frankly don't really push that at all. And that's kind of how this show is able to exist, and I'm able to spend as much time as I do on it. So anyways, that's just a sort of holiday plea to, patronage and try out the services that I offer up to you. So anyways, and what else do I got? Things are good. Holidays are almost upon us, and hopefully you'll be able to take some time to slow down, chill out. I will be doing the opposite of that all of December. I'm traveling a ton, playing some shows with Taken. And by the way, if you're in the Canadian area, please come to hang out and see us. We play December 8th in Toronto with Counterparts, and then we also play on the 10th in Montreal. And then there's 2 other shows that we are going to announce very shortly that'll be super, super fun as well. So 4 shows up there. I'm going to be dead after that, but it'll be fun. So yeah. Now here's James, right? I'm not going to belabor it and talk more about it because you just need to hear this conversation, especially the tail end of it. The last 20 to 30 minutes are just mind-blowing, okay? That's all I'm going to say. So talk to you later. And you're for sure one of those people where I'm just like, when did you first meet? I'd be like, I have no idea. Like we just existed in each other's worlds.
Totally.
Except when you dated Nick's sister, where you ended up.
Who I met at your show.
That's right. I forgot about that.
At the showcase.
The showcase. Yeah, that's beautiful. But that was when you were existing more like, we'd go to practice, be like, oh, hey, there's James. What's up? But I was shortly after your Life Sentence release, the EP, I was just like, I was all in on you guys. I was like, oh, dude, like this band's unbelievable because not only was I into the whole like sort of, spooky nature of the band in regards to the, dark imagery and everything that you guys were going for initially. But I just like the fact that you guys were, only a few years older than me. And I was just like, it felt tangible. It was like, oh, wow, like this is a band that could exist alongside other bands that were doing it nationally and whatever. But, kind of focusing on those early years, like, in your head, was it really, in retrospect, was it just exciting being in the mix of all that? Or, was your, I guess, kind of initial approach as far as like, what you were doing with the band as far as like your messaging and everything else, like, that people either loved, I guess you could say this about 18 Visions in general. They either loved you guys or they hated you. Like you never really fell into the middle of that.
No.
And especially too at the beginning, like people really had strong opinions on 18 Visions. Did you feel like that was was that exciting for you, or was that very much just like, oh, like that's just kind of what you're getting,
Yeah, I think, it was all exciting because we're young and like, so young, 16 years old when we started the band. playing a show at Vinyl Records, Vinyl Solution, was like super cool.
Right. Huge.
Playing our first show ever, we played at Side by Side Skate Rink in Huntington Beach, and like that was amazing.
Right.
So it's like getting shows. It's like this something you don't really like think is really going to happen. You're just kind of jamming with some friends, and then it starts to snowball into something a little more.
Right.
And then a little more from there, and a little more from there, and you keep at it, and it just continues to grow and grow. So it's super exciting. It's super fun. You're in recording a demo, and then it turns into, somebody wanting to put your music out like on a record label.
Right.
And it's just, I think at the time you don't really care what anybody else thinks. You're just like,
that's true. So
engulfed in the excitement of it and the innocence of like what you're doing, you know. You're screwing around in class, writing lyrics about how shitty life is, and like, what's going on, in your life. And I think a lot of people, like, in young bands, try to connect and try to write about these things that are ailing them because of teen angst and whatnot. But like, I was really kind of going through it, and like I was still like dealing with things that had happened in my youth that I didn't have a father around, and my mom worked her ass off to provide for me and my sister, so my mom wasn't around a ton. So it was just like kind of me doing my own thing, and me gravitating to whatever would let me latch onto it. And the music was one of those things that kind of drew me away from everything else that was going on in my life, which, looking back, had its good things and bad things to it. Definitely pulled me away from like the sports and athletics that I was into and that I was excelling and succeeding at. Right. Which, looking back, kind of bums me out a little bit that I didn't stick with that stuff. But I'm stoked where I'm at today, and it's just life kind of takes its own course sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I do think that there is, that idea of people, getting a reaction out of what it is that you're doing, because like you don't, like you mentioned with the youthfulness of it, you're not bargaining with how people are going to react to what it is you're doing. Like, you just want people to be into it, because you're excited about, like you said, playing shows and that momentum, as opposed to like, oh, like I'm going to have to reconcile with this piece of art I released, 10 years from now. It's like, no one has any foresight for that, because you can't, because otherwise you probably would never release anything, because you would be too crippled by fear, being like, oh, someone's going to pick through these lyrics in 10 years and be like, why did you say this? It's like, what?
Yep.
And I'm sure this happened to you.
Absolutely. And fast forward, almost, pretty much 20 years later, right, from, the first thing we ever put out to, this new album we put out now. And there's a lot of stuff that I know Keith and I both look back on that we just like cringe at.
Of course.
Like, if I can go back in time and change how I approached that vocal, or maybe this song didn't have to be 6 minutes long. Right. Stuff like that, where you can't, but no, and I think too, you don't start thinking about like what other people are going to think about what you're doing until you've been in it for a while. Right. And you start to get that negative feedback. Right. It's not all positive. Right. And I don't think I ever did anything to get like some crazy weird reaction. I definitely had different things that I was into, and, different stylings musically and visually. But I think more or less I always took it as like, what can make us different from the band that's going on before us and the band that's going on after us outside of our music. Yep. I always kind of try to take this concept that if you had the same band on the bill, right, five of the same exact band, and they played the same exact songs, what would make one band stick out from the other? If they all sounded exactly the same to the T, and it's going to be, the band that has something visually a little more interesting to them. Absolutely. Right? And so that's how I always kind of took things, because we're always trying to stand out, especially when you're on tour and, you're in this sea of bands that are, trying to break through and make it and, get their music out there. Those are those things you start to think about later on. You don't think about whether somebody's going to hate it.
Right.
Or love it. You just want somebody to remember.
I just want to be
you.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. You want to inspire reaction.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you fall into the middle, those are the bands that, frankly, don't have any impact whatsoever. Like people don't either have no matter what you mention for a band that you like, if you hate the band, you're going to immediately be like, oh yeah, that band sucks, and you're like, oh okay, like at least you inspired that reaction. Or obviously on the flip side is people like, oh yeah, ride and die for that band or whatever.
Right.
Otherwise, it's just like, what do you think about the band? They're okay. Completely forgotten about.
Totally. It's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And it's you have to do that. Like I mean, to what you're talking about with the aesthetic, I loved the fact that it's like a band like I remember that band Elliott from Louisville, Kentucky, that put out a couple records on Rev. Their whole thing was like, I saw them play at Coos, and they basically dressed in like white shirts, black ties, black pants. Because, when you are a band member and you're setting up your own equipment, people are immediately going to be like, oh, he's wearing a Bloodlet shirt, so of course they're going to be like metal or whatever. But like if a band is setting up and they just look like bank tellers, people have no idea what the band sounds like. And of course, like there's no way that this could exist in the internet now. But like they got up there and you were just like, I don't know what Elliott sounds like. And then they play and you're just like, oh wow, this is amazing. But like that was their whole aesthetic. And to your point, that was the only real way that you could differentiate yourself.
Yeah, you didn't have the internet back then,
right?
At least working the way that it does now.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah, you're able to access what everybody looks like immediately. But focusing more on you, so you were I'm not going to nitpick a lot of the stuff that you've already talked about in a million other interviews, but like you were born in Chicago and then moved to Southern California when you were young, and like you mentioned, your father wasn't in your life and your mom was completely on the grind, basically providing for you and younger sister, correct? Yeah. So, I mean, would you characterize like your family life as being kind of, stressful because of that? Or was it just basically kind of all you knew? So you really just kind of existed?
Yeah, I think, once my parents split up, it was really all I knew.
Right. And how old were you when they got divorced?
I was 11, maybe 10, 11. I was pretty young.
But that's still, you're aware.
Yeah. And then just coping and dealing with that, and then dealing with like, finding out like the reasons why, and like, adult stuff, that an 11 or 12-year-old is trying to process.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it was, I was living in it because that's kind of all I knew when I was, kind of starting to get a grasp on life. But dealing with those issues and coping with them, trying to figure out like, who I am because of it, and like, where am I supposed to go because of it? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to live my life? Like, what choices should I be making? Am I making the right choices? And then it's like, then you start rebelling.
Sure.
Then you're like, you kind of want to go the complete opposite of, what you should be doing. So there's just that. It's just, figuring out life, figuring out who you are,
right?
Dealing with that, struggling.
Did you have because of that, like, did you feel like you and your sister got closer because of that? You guys felt like you needed to stick together, or were you kind of dealing with it in your own ways?
Yeah, we dealt with it in completely different ways. And I think to this day, we still completely do, like 100% different. Yeah. Tried getting her into hardcore, tried talking to her about straight edge, that lifestyle, but that just wasn't who she was. It didn't interest her. She had a different group of friends. We both had like our two like very troublemaker group of friends. Like I had mine that, I stumbled upon once I got into hardcore.
Sure.
And, she had hers that, weren't involved in hardcore, that were just like troubled kids.
Yeah.
I would say the main difference was that like, because I played sports growing up and I was into athletics, I had those friends that were a little more like narrow, a little more, more normal.
Yeah. Typical teenager,
typical teenager that came from like a good family that like supported them and loved them. Not that mine didn't,
Right.
but you know, they had two parents around, and maybe mom was a stay-at-home mom back then, or you know, they were financially well off.
Right.
They were normal. I felt like maybe that kind of kept me a little bit more grounded too.
Yeah.
Because once I stopped playing sports, I didn't stop hanging out with those people. And
that's cool.
I'm still connected to
That's good.
them to this day, like,
Right.
you know, 20 something years later.
Yeah.
But I would say that would be the main difference between me and my sister.
Mhm.
Just our two different, totally groups of friends and the different paths that we went down.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I I knew that you were obviously into sports and, you know, self-described jock in regards to that big, because I really think that, you know, whatever, I'll put both of us in the same class as far as, you know, generationally speaking within hardcore. We obviously exist in the same scene, even though you're a few years older than me. The notion of combining sports and hardcore was still like more sports and punk in general, where it's still very much just like, I don't know, the jock mentality, like that was still a weird thing. But like, you know, you were able to exist in both of those cultures, even though I'm sure like your sports friends were just like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And then your, you know, friends that were obviously like, you know, more into hardcore and just be like, dude, James, what are you playing baseball still for? This is ridiculous. Like,
yeah. I mean, we had a friend that, was like, this is going to sound super lame,
sure,
but was like a very innovative, like rollerblader.
Yeah. No. that's
like,
that was the time. Yeah.
I mean, like, no joke. Like, this kid was like a pioneer for it. And
Right.
like, he was super young. He was like 17, 18, 19 years old, super young, super good. My friends gave him so much shit. He quit.
Because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I had my own reasons for walking away from sports, but I mean, a lot of my friends that I grew up playing ball with, the friends that I still hang out with and talk to this day, that were like, you know, engulfed in sports,
right,
and, you know, went on to get college scholarships and do stuff like that. They were going to hardcore shows with me. Like, it was cool. Like, they were into like VOD, and
that's
like,
cool. So they were able to intermingle with
and
one
they were
another.
into like Earth Crisis and Strife. They didn't know about like, you know, super underground bands and like the obscure like record labels. Like, they weren't going to like Converge shows, and like they weren't into Botch, but like the stuff that was more accessible to them, that was on like Rev or Victory, like they were into that, and like they still are.
That's cool.
So it's like, yeah, it's you know, cool that they weren't like super closed off to that. So I never really got the whole like, you know, hey, like, what are you doing with your life? Like, or like, hey, like, what's this like straight edge scene all about? Or like, hey, like, what's this like sports thing you're doing? Like, that's
right.
like, I never got pulled away by like a certain friend or like a certain group of friends. Everybody was pretty cool and chill with what I did.
That's cool. Yeah. I do think that our generation was very much a tide in turning the fact that like, yeah, you can like sports and not be a jock. Like the jock mentality in regards to like, I want to beat this person up because they look like a pussy or whatever. It's like, what? Like,
and I probably had some of that,
yeah,
you know, until I was like, I mean, 17, 18, 19 years old. But I mean, for the most part, it was due to me getting picked on in high school, like getting bullied by like older kids for being straight edge.
Yeah.
And like that really pulled out like that aggression from me, rather than just like kind of, you know, cultivating it myself.
Right.
It was more of like, you know, getting poked and prodded at over and over and over until you don't have a choice but to push back.
Right.
And you know, that's when I started becoming a little bit more, I guess, jockish, you know, mentally. But,
sure.
You know, I was never like seeking out fights or like picking on other kids or bullying other kids. Like, you know, just always just tried to mind my own business.
Attention BetMGM customers. Have a friend who loves sports as much as you do. Here's a chance for the both of you to earn a $50 bonus when they sign up through BetMGM's Refer a Friend program. Just sign into your BetMGM account and click on the Refer a Friend program to send your friend a message inviting them to register a new account in the same state you use BetMGM in. Once your friend signs up and makes a deposit, they'll receive a $50 bonus. And once your friend places a bet with their bonus and the wager is settled, you'll receive a $50 bonus as well. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New and existing customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire in 30 days. Please, gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
I'm Jason Alexander.
And I'm Peter Tillman.
And we know you've been pining for a brand new podcast hosted by an internationally beloved comedy superstar and television icon from the 90s.
Yeah, and I did talk radio for over 25 years in Los Angeles.
Well, come on, build yourself up a little. This reflects on me. Build it up.
What should I say?
Top-rated show. Come on, 5 days a week.
Oh, I was on 5 days a week. Pretty good show. Thousands of interviews.
Yeah, but shining star. You're a shining star. Say you're a shining star.
I'm a shining star. Yeah. You know what? I'll know all this because you actually told everybody the name of our podcast, which is
really. No, really.
Yeah.
It's an informative and funny show that seeks to answer the things that make Peter and I say, really? No, really?
That's right, Jason. We'll ask the question that everybody wants to know the answers to.
But we'll get answers that just may surprise you, inspire you, but will absolutely entertain you.
So join us. You'll laugh, you'll learn.
And me and the shining star over here might actually get paid.
It's Really No Really with Jason Alexander and Peter Tillman.
On the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Where else would they get them?
During the summer of 2020, some Americans suspected that the FBI had secretly infiltrated the racial justice demonstrations. And you know what? They were right. I'm Trevor Aronson, and I'm hosting a new podcast series, Alphabet Boys.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
Each season will take you inside an undercover investigation. In the first season of Alphabet Boys, we're revealing how the FBI spied on protesters in Denver. At the center of this story is a raspy-voiced, cigar-smoking man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
He's a shark, and not in the good badass way. He's a nasty shark.
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Today's show is brought to you by an amazing company called Rockabilia. Now, what do? They sell band merch, but there are so many things that set it apart from all of the other fly-by-night companies that you've probably, maybe accidentally ordered from before. So let me tell you some amazing facts about Rockabilia. First of all, they've existed for 30 years. The real deal. Since 1987, they've been around. And it's your complete one-stop shop for all band merch. Like if you're looking for pop, punk, metal, whatever it is, you can order it from them. Like if you're like, you know what, I really need an At the Gates t-shirt. And you know what I also need? I love New Found Glory, so I'm going to do that. And they offer both. Very few places you'll be able to find that stuff. And they have over 500,000 items to choose from. And hard to find stuff that you won't be able to see anywhere else. They also have officially licensed product. So all that horrible stuff, if you ever try to Google band merch, it's an absolute nightmare. And then if you decide to go order it off of Amazon or something like that, 99.9% of that product, and that's just a number I made up, but let's say a wide majority of these pieces of band merch that you would randomly order are not officially licensed. So therefore, the artist is not getting any payment out of that. And it's just it's a great company. I haven't ordered from them recently, but I did, some maybe 10 or so years ago. Got a few pieces of merch, loved the process, super easy. Was able to save my credit card information, everything else, and I could not recommend them anymore. So go to rockabilia.com and you'll be able to order a bunch of stuff. Please do it. All right, Rockabilia, they're the real deal. They get their bands paid. It's legit. And plus, then you'll be like, yo, I look cool because I got new band merch. So, rockabilia.com. Check them out. You've always struck me for as long as I've known you. Like, you're a, outgoing and friendly person, like, in regards to the fact that, obviously being a front person of a band, there needs to be some semblance of, like, oh, yeah, like, I like people. Was that always kind of the case in regards to you as a human? Or was that something you kind of had to, break out of your shell and feel like you had the confidence to be like, oh yeah, I am outgoing?
No, I've always been pretty outgoing.
Okay.
Just, going back to like my early years of elementary school, like I always had a pretty good group of friends, but I was always bullied like by older kids, like 2 or 3 grade levels up from me for whatever reason. Getting my video games stolen.
Right.
Just like, people try to be your friend. Hey dude, like, can I borrow this? And let them borrow it. And like never get it back. Like those people,
Yeah.
Getting pushed around on a playground.
Right.
I think maybe a lot of it had to do with like I was in like combo classes in elementary school. So, for third grade, I was in a 3-4.
Right.
So I was on the other side of school. Like I was with the bigger kids and the older kids. And, maybe that's why those things started to happen to me at a young, early age. But, even through all that, like I still had like a pretty good group of friends growing up. And then too, like playing sports, like you learn how to be a teammate.
You learn those skills.
You learn how to be a teammate and like, you support your buddy that, might completely suck at baseball.
Of course.
But you know what I mean? You're like, still like, hey dude, like, good job, like pat on the back. Like,
of course.
You learn to be that person. So I feel like, even if you don't end up like a life in sports, like, crushing it in high school and getting college scholarships or like, going pro, I still think there's a lot to learn from it.
Absolutely.
In the early years of just like being a teammate and how to interact and socialize with people that are either better than you at the same level as you, or, maybe not at the same level as you.
Right.
You learn that acceptance.
Totally. Yeah. No, that's a very important point. So I wanted to pull in one thread where you were talking about the the notion of being bullied because obviously the being straight edge and stuff like that. Because did you go to all 4 years at Huntington?
3
of them. Okay.
Yeah.
Because that definitely was in the mid '90s a shift of people being like straight edge becoming more pervasive, especially within the Orange County hardcore scene, and like now existing like in high schools and stuff like that where people kind of knew what it was. But it's interesting that people were. Yeah, just bullying you based on the fact like, oh, you don't drink, and like that was really a big pain point for you.
Yeah, it started my freshman year.
Jeez.
It was brutal. Like, I going into high school played football. It was like the first year I was ever allowed to play football, and I was like so stoked on it. And like everybody on my team like picked on me because I didn't drink and like I wasn't a stoner, and it just sucked. And so like that was a huge reason why I moved schools. So I moved over to Huntington, and like, again, I'm like the new kid, and, my best friend went there. I was a year, we were the same age, but I was a grade ahead of him.
Okay.
And so his freshman year, all these dudes that I played baseball with were coming into that school. So I had like some built-in friends, and then I met other straight edge dudes.
Right.
And another dude that was edge at the time transferred over with me from Fountain Valley. And even then, man, I still got picked on by straight edge kids, like by like juniors and seniors.
Right. They just felt like you were young and dumb and you weren't really straight edge enough yet.
Yeah.
Right.
Pretty much.
So, and it's
which is so lame because maybe one of those dudes is still edge.
Right.
Maybe.
And also it could have completely, I mean, obviously you went the other direction and you were, very committed to your beliefs in regards to that, but you could have completely swung the opposite direction and be like, I don't care about straight edge or the hardcore scene because of these dicks. And like you have that singular experience, it just turns you off.
So I was getting it from that angle, and then I was getting it from the other angle with, again, dudes that were like 2-3 years older than me that just happened to be in a class with me or something.
Right.
And they were just, I guess like the Sea Cliff, like,
oh sure,
cool, like rich kids,
right.
Had cool cars and, partied and, just I was getting it from all angles. It sucked,
yeah. That does suck.
Yeah.
And this is going to sound weird, but like, is 18 Visions like ostensibly your first band? Like, did you play in anything else?
No, that was it. Like,
okay, that's so weird.
So yeah, I mean, I was into music, obviously. But Ken Floyd and Dave Peters, who I started the band with, asked me if I wanted to like sing.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, sure. And there was this other kid and another dude that were involved early on.
Right.
And I think it was actually the other dude, this dude Ethan, that played guitar as well, that actually got me in with them.
Oh, okay.
And he ended up not sticking, and we practiced, 5 or 6 times. And dude, I got kicked out of the band for Russ from Eyelid.
Right.
So
I forgot about that.
So Russ from Eyelid is singing for, what would later become 18 Visions. I don't know what it was called at the time.
Yeah.
this is like, I think maybe he was starting to develop Eyelid, and you know, they played one show with him, and then like that was it. And then Eyelid became a band,
right?
And
but you had never like you'd never done anything.
Nothing,
so there was basically like, James is cool. Maybe he can yell in this mic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's basically it.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay.
And I mean, I never had like any aspirations to like sing or be in a band. It was just like, you know, I was never like, hey, I'm going to do this. So I was like,
well, sports was your track.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I was like really, really good. So I was like, I'm going to play baseball and like
see where that goes.
Hopefully get a scholarship.
Yeah.
You know? And
yeah.
Got into this band and my grades started sucking. And then, you know, the next thing you know, it's like, hey, you know, we need you to show up for, you know, baseball class. I was like, well, what is that? Like, okay, well, you know, we tend to the field and we drag the field and we lift weights and we run up and down the stairs. I was like, that sounds lame.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
And so I quit.
Right.
Which is like stupid because I wake up at 5:30 every day.
Right.
And I go run at the gym and I like throw around a couple weights.
Totally. You're like, I wish I could have done that back then. Right?
Working on my fitness, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's super stupid that that's a reason why I quit, but that's, you know, a huge reason. I was like more interested in music and hanging out with my buddies after school.
Of course.
And like doing band practice. And yeah, so I just completely fell into it. And I don't remember how it got brought about of me, being back in the band, but I did. I joined back up with them. We went through, you know, a ton of lineup changes before we even, you know, recorded a demo.
Right.
And then did the whole demo thing, changed our band name a couple more times.
Sure.
Yeah, it was just, you're trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
You know? Like, what's this, like, okay, we got this band. What's it going to be?
Right.
Like, what's it going to, like, who's going to be in it? Like, okay, this dude doesn't want to play anymore. No, okay, now what are we going to do?
Yeah, we met another guy that can fill in or whatever. Yeah.
And it's just like, you know, the band kind of figuring itself out for a while.
Well, and I think too, because like, even though, you know, like you've technically, like 18 Visions was your first band and then you existed in it for obviously many, many years, the fact that you have gone through, you know, shape-shifting changes, not only aesthetically, but then also sonically, where it's just like, you know, there are very few people where you could put on, you know, the Lifeless EP and be like, oh, this is 18 Visions. People would be like, huh? Like, you can see the through line for it, but like, you know, there's so much distance between those two things. So that's why it's like you were growing up in public, in the quote unquote public eye, even though it's, you know, ostensibly smaller. You were a mainstream celebrity or anything like that, but the notion of people were paying attention to what you were doing, and you had to make all of those, you know, weird, well, not weird, but you had to make the whatever failure you had from a musicianship standpoint was out there for everybody to see.
Yeah. It's crazy too, because, you know, we have our old fans that were like, oh, I absolutely hate, you know, the last album, or I hate the last 2 or 3 albums.
Totally.
You know, and then you have all these new fans that, especially on the last album, that are like digging it, right? And they're like, they come up to you at a show, like, man, I love you guys. I saw you here.
Right.
I bought all your old albums. Like, what the hell?
Totally
is up with those albums?
Right. They sound like trash cans being thrown down a hallway, right?
Yeah, and so it's like there's no middle ground.
There is,
you know
not.
what I mean? And if there was, it was just like a small percentage of fans. You know, and the fans that were still coming out were like, which was so awesome, were coming out because we were still playing like a couple songs off Vanity and like Obsession. You know, but like for the most part, anything pre that was gone.
Yeah. No, and I think that's, I mean, I'm glad you explained it that way. The, you know, did you like, you know, as 18 Visions started to, you know, go out and tour and everything like that, did you immediately like the touring lifestyle and get adjusted to that pretty quickly? Or is that something you kind of had to learn to?
No, I loved it. Okay. It was like, I'm just so mellow and like so easygoing.
Yep.
You know, I don't like nitpick a lot. I'm not much for like arguing.
Right.
Like my wife and I never fight.
Sure.
Like rarely, because we're just not wired that way.
Right.
And it's like, life's too short to like pick apart like the small shit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like, I never did that with my friends or my bandmates.
Sure.
I always tried to be super easygoing. I think like if my bandmates got bummed on me, it's because like I might have like maybe I broke stuff or like raged too hard or like,
did dumb stuff.
Yeah. Did stupid stuff to like make the band look stupid. Like, in a club, like, trashing a dressing room or something because I just read Motley Crue The Dirt.
Sure.
Just like stupid,
of course,
stupid stuff like that. It's like, okay, looking back on myself, like, yeah, I would be bummed on myself too.
Totally. Yeah.
Which years later, I'm in another band and like having to babysit kids that were like doing way stupider shit than I was,
Right.
So I always found it like pretty easy. I found it interesting. I found it fun and exciting. And, it was always just like so mellow. It wasn't until you start growing up and getting older and like there's bills to pay and, relationships and friendships and all these things you're missing out on at home that start to like take its toll on you.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm at a point in my life now where I could never imagine like going out and grinding it on the road.
Yeah. You want to go out for 2.5 months? No, not at all.
Absolutely
not even for a second.
No.
Yeah.
Millions of dollars involved.
Right.
Then we'll talk about it.
Right. Yeah. Then I might consider it, but let's be honest.
Yeah.
Something else that I found so interesting and kind of, this isn't like a 2-pronged question, but I'll lead into the second one after we tackle this first one, where maybe I was just paying so much attention to it just because, I myself was straight edge, obviously playing in bands, where like the rise of violence with straight edge and crews and that whole mentality that started to happen in the mid-90s. And then it was so weird because to me, you always were thrust into the poster boy status for people looking for, whether it was like, I so distinctly remember cutting out an article in the Orange County Register with you wearing like a hockey jersey of like Colorado Avalanche or something like that. Yeah. So, but I so distinctly remember where I was just like, oh, that's cool. Like they're doing an article on straight edge, but like, obviously it was a very much like, oh, like there are positive aspects, but like, look at all this violence. And it always seemed to be, you were kind of like the person that was like thrust up into like, oh, James Hart, lead singer of 18 Visions because of this. I presume that was really in certain respects stressful for you because people were like looking to you as being some sort of, leader in regards to this, where I'm sure you never signed up for this sort of thing.
Yeah, no, it sucked for sure. Definitely got in like my fair share of fights,
right?
Like at shows, outside of shows, like at school, outside of school. But again, like I said, it goes back to like being poked and prodded at,
right?
In my youth, like,
sure,
getting pushed around and like, and finally, like at some point you're going to lash out. Right. And I never went like looking for fights or like starting fights. And I remember like, me and some of my friends specifically trying to avoid them and just not being able to because somebody's, being a drunk asshole,
right?
Or trying to like, size wise, trying to bully you around, or, a bunch of dudes at a show, like singling out one of your friends, and I mean like outsiders to a show.
Right.
Like, one specific incident, is at an Earth Crisis VOD show at the Palace in LA, and like some Nazis at the show, which was like fairly common occurrence back then,
especially in LA.
They would sprout up every once in a while. And like already tensions are high because there's racism in a venue where we preach social acceptability,
of course,
and so already all eyes are on these people, right? And like they're not used to a hardcore like setting and like a mosh pit and like what goes on, so like they get hit the wrong way that they don't want to, and like all of a sudden a fight breaks out, and then it gets taken outside, and all hell breaks loose. It's just stuff like that you kind of get thrust into because you're protecting your friends or protecting yourself. And then for me, the whole crew thing, started out as just like something to call our group of friends.
Of course.
That was like super innocent.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you let other friends in and other friends in, and friends in different states and different cities. And, they go on caring about business in a different way.
Right.
And, people get hurt, things start getting violent, and all of a sudden, like, those dudes are violent. Like, don't let these dudes into shows. Like, 18V wasn't allowed to play certain venues because of who I was and who I was associated with. And, just, it kind of sucks because I wasn't like that dude, but I got branded that dude.
Totally.
Which is definitely, a bummer. And like, I worked personally very, very hard to like break that stigma of like myself and the band.
Yeah.
And like, we had to like prove ourselves like that, violence wouldn't happen at our shows, or, that I wouldn't do this or I wouldn't do that, or my friends wouldn't do this or do that. Like, I had to sit down and talk to my friends before we would go on stage, or like before we play a show. Hey, dudes, no matter what, keep it chill.
Chill out. Yeah.
Like, no matter what, no matter who hits you from what angle or why, just don't do anything.
Don't
please.
react. Right.
Yeah. Like, I'm trying to do something positive here, like with, my friends, and like be a part of this. It's something I love. Like, don't ruin this for me, please.
Yeah.
And so you work hard, and, thankfully, like, we worked our way to like acceptance with some of these clubs and venues and promoters, and it wasn't an easy road.
Sure,
for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, the only reason I mention it is just because, like I said, just from an outsider's perspective, where it was like, because I didn't go to high school in Orange County. It's like I went to like Lutheran High in Orange, but like obviously existing in the same rooms as each other, it was like I always knew you as this, friendly, caring person. And then it's like I would see the way that other people would carry around baggage, and just like, oh yeah, like fuck James Hart. And I was always just like he's literally never done anything to me or any of my friends. I can't say one bad word about that person. So I always just found this really this interesting juxtaposition of who you were as a person versus obviously what other people's opinions were. And granted, a lot of that is just dumb, young scene drama.
Totally.
But like, I appreciate you laying it out in regards to the fact that, there was an act that, like, even if it was young, dumb scene drama, just having to put forth like, all right, we got to concentrate on like not like doing everything we can to dispel this stupid stuff that has followed us for, how many ever years and stuff like that. So, but I appreciate you laying it out like that.
Yeah. I mean, I remember, gosh, like one of the early shows we were allowed to play at Chain Reaction, like right after it was
calming down.
Well, so it was Public Storage, right?
Course,
That's what it was called. And then we weren't allowed to play there. And then Ron let us play.
Yep.
And it was cool.
Right.
And then he let us play again and again and again. And like this dude I used to be buddies with, like him and some of my friends got into it, like in that little side area at Chain. And I literally tried to break up a fight.
Yeah.
And this dude I used to be buddies with popped me on the head with brass knuckles.
Yeah.
And like, I wanted more than anything to destroy this dude. And like, it took everything in me to not.
Sure.
Because like my band was playing a show there.
Right.
And like, we were finally allowed to play there.
Right.
Like,
you're like, I'd worked so hard to get to this point.
And and that was like one situation that just like was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Like, I'm trying to like diffuse a situation here. And like, I'm still getting like thrust into it.
Right.
Doing everything I can to stop it getting thrust into it. It just sucked. And then like growing up in high school, like the police there, like classifying straight edge as a gang, as a white power gang.
Oh, I never knew it had that distinction.
White power.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I remember like me and Ken Floyd talking to the principal one day. And like the principal straight up called Ken to his face, white power. He's like, dude, I'm happy.
You're like, yeah, do you see what my...
Not to mention like, dude, like we don't believe that. No, I don't care what you believe. This is what the police are telling me that you are. So yes, Ken, you are white power.
Wow.
It's just insane to me. Insane.
It does make no sense whatsoever. That is so crazy.
Yeah.
Attention BetMGM customers. Have a friend who loves sports as much as you do. Here's a chance for the both of you to earn a $50 bonus when they sign up through BetMGM's Refer a Friend program. Just sign into your BetMGM account and click on the Refer a Friend program to send your friend a message inviting them to register a new account in the same state you use BetMGM in. Once your friend signs up and makes a deposit, they'll receive a $50 bonus. And once your friend places a bet with their bonus and the wager is settled, you'll receive a $50 bonus as well. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New and existing customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire in 30 days. Please, gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Really? I'm Jason Alexander.
And I'm Peter Tillman.
And we know you've been pining for a brand new podcast hosted by an internationally beloved comedy superstar and television icon from the 90s.
Yeah, and I did talk radio for over 25 years in Los Angeles.
Well, come on, build yourself up a little. This reflects on me. Build it up.
What should I say?
Top-rated show. Come on, 5 days a week.
I was on 5 days a week. Pretty good show. Thousands of interviews.
Yeah, but shining star. You're a shining star. Say you're a shining star.
I'm a shining star. Yeah. You know what? I'll ignore all this because you actually told everybody the name of our podcast, which is
really. Yeah. It's an informative and funny show that seeks to answer the things that make Peter and I say, really? No, really?
That's right, Jason. We'll ask the question that everybody wants to know the answers to.
But we'll get answers that just may surprise you, inspire you, but will absolutely entertain you.
So join us. You'll laugh, you'll learn.
And me and the shining star over here might actually get paid.
It's Really No Really with Jason Alexander and Peter Tillman.
On the iHeart Radio app, on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Where else would they get them?
During the summer of 2020, some Americans suspected that the FBI had secretly infiltrated the racial justice demonstrations. And you know what? They were right. I'm Trevor Aronson, and I'm hosting a new podcast series, Alphabet Boys.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
Each season will take you inside an undercover investigation. In the first season of Alphabet Boys, we're revealing how the FBI spied on protesters in Denver. At the center of this story is a raspy-voiced, cigar-smoking man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
He's a shark, and not in the good badass way. He's a nasty shark.
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeart Radio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Your smile. You would agree that's important, right? Yeah? I think so too. And there is a rad company that we work with called Smile Direct Club. And they believe that you shouldn't have to pay a fortune to get a smile that you'll love and other people will be like, hey, that person's got a good smile. So they work directly with state-certified dentists and orthodontists to ship custom invisible aligners right to your door each month. So you don't have those ridiculously expensive in-office visits, embarrassing wires, or frankly, wasting money. And so you can get started with an impression kit, which is done in the privacy of your own home at your own schedule for $95. They ship it right to your door. It's awesome. It's covered by the Smile Guarantee, so if your liners are not a good fit, you get your money back. Not to mention, Smile Direct Club is extremely affordable. And the aligner treatment is 60% less than other brands or braces, and you could save even more with insurance or a flexible spending account. Many dental insurance plans reimburse customers for a portion of the cost of the invisible aligners, and Smile Direct Club accepts all FSAs, flexible spending accounts, for those of you not in the medical know. Plus, the listeners of this very show get 50% off this evaluation cost. Now, I've been talking to you about Smile Direct Club, and it's cool because I get feedback from listeners being like, hey, I tried this out and I really enjoy it. And I did too. The kit comes super quick and easy. You have fun with the little, paste and mold that you put in your, it's not a retainer, but like the dental thing that you put in your mouth to get the impressions. Apologies for the untechnical terms on this, but I just get excited to talk about it because it is so cool. And it makes it so easy. What you do is you take those impressions, toss them in the box, send them back, and then every so often they ship you the new aligners to make your smile awesome. So I need you to save 50% off the cost of Smile Direct Club's at-home impression kit by visiting SmileDirectClub.com and using the promo code WORDS. That's SmileDirectClub.com, promo code WORDS. And now that's just what you need to do, okay? Please enjoy it, make your smile better, and thank me later for it, okay? SmileDirectClub.com, promo code WORDS. Now back to the show.
In a world where everyone is confined to their homes, society begins its largest binge watch to date. In the hallowed library of Hulu, or perhaps on a shelf of DVDs you haven't looked at in a decade, is a show that perfectly encapsulates life in the early aughts and launched a friendship that would inspire millions. Hi, I'm Zach Braff.
And I'm Donald Faison.
In 2001, we starred in Scrubs, a sitcom that revealed a glimpse of what it was like to survive a medical internship. As Turk and JD, we explored guy love.
Nearly 20 years later, a lot has changed. We're not Supermen, but we're still best friends. Given the mandatory lockdown, there's no better time to relive the series that brought us together in the first place. And we're doing it with a podcast.
That's right, people. We're going to bring friends and crew members and fellow cast members and writers. And guess what? We're going to even invite some of you to call into the podcast and ask all the questions you want of the entire Sacred Heart staff.
Join us for Fake Doctors, Real Friends on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts.
In almost every single interview, people always bring up the, like fashion core and like how that existed. Like, to me, anytime anybody talks about that, I always feel like it's very, people approach it very much as like, oh, it's cute you guys did that. And like, it's fun. But like, I mean, I personally saw the lineage of obviously what you guys were, not only what you were directly influenced by because of just the sheer logistics of like, oh yeah, like, like Ken was working at Banana Republic. So like we got free clothes. And like, yeah. Like, and then plus, you and Javier obviously going through, esthetician school. That's what you call it, right?
Cosmetology.
Cosmetology.
Yeah.
Esthetician if you're taking care of skin, right?
Yeah, right.
So cosmetology school, but like, so I saw the lineage of it and like it made sense to me. And then I think it, what I think a lot of people don't view it through the prism of like you were trying to differentiate yourself, like in a positive way, not in like oh, look at us because we're like rock stars, but it was a matter of like aesthetically trying to draw a line in the sand. Did you ever feel like people like basically just did not take you seriously because of that?
Yeah, okay. For sure. Every now and again. And the whole fashion core thing, it's funny because like people think we started that.
Yeah,
like we coined that term.
Yeah.
It wasn't us. It was like given to us. And so
right.
I'm going to go to a show, a specific show that like really sticks out to me.
Okay.
So we're out on the Take Action tour with Dillinger Escape Plan, Poison the Well, Further Seems Forever, and Avenged. And we're playing at Irving Plaza, New York City. And there's this dude up front row, and he keeps calling me a faggot.
Right.
Like, get off the stage, you fucking faggots. You're a faggot. Get off the stage. Fuck you. And so I get off stage and like I hop down there and I'm like, dude, what is your fucking problem? Right. Like, well, I didn't say anything. I was like, dude,
I was literally looking at you.
I clearly heard you. Like, what's your problem? He's like, oh, I just fucking don't like you guys because you're fashion core and you're from Long Island. I was like,
you were clearly mistaking us.
I was like, dude. So
that band is called From Autumn to Ashes, sir. So, you are mistaking us.
So like I grabbed him and I kissed him on the mouth.
That's so good.
And I slapped him across the face. Right. And I said, now you can call me a faggot.
It's perfect.
It's like, dude, like, it's like the ignorance of, certain people that, I mean, I don't know who that dude was there for.
No,
I have no idea. But like, just the onslaught of heckling and like the negative words that came out of his mouth. Like, it just, we would get that from time to time.
Right.
Like where nowadays, like if somebody throws out the word faggot at a show, like a hardcore show.
Oh yeah.
Like, especially towards a band.
Totally.
Like, dude, that person's getting carried out of that venue by the entire venue.
Of course. Yeah,
you know what I mean? And so, I mean, obviously this happened like well over 10 years ago. I'm not saying that it was acceptable, but like, people weren't like,
people didn't know how to grasp that.
Right. And like, it wasn't like as, it wasn't something that people freaked out as much over.
Sure.
I guess.
Right.
But when you're out on, when you're up on stage and, you're doing your thing and like somebody's like, bringing that much negativity just because of something that they think you are. Obviously that dude had no clue who we were or what we were or like what we were about, or even where we were from.
Right.
It sucks. And, it makes it hard to deal with sometimes, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I mean, I definitely, it's like, it was the, I think that one of the pinnacle moments that I remember watching you guys, I think it was Hellfest, I want to say 2000 possibly. It was like Taken wasn't playing, but we were out there, and I just remember that was the first time where I felt like the groundswell of support for you guys like started to exist. It was just like, because like even though you guys were touring and obviously active from a national perspective, I always viewed you as a local band, and so like when you travel 3,000 miles away and you're just like, holy shit, like all these people are into 18 Visions, like in the same way that I'm used to watching them play at Showcase. And it was also the aesthetic that you were presenting of just like, oh yeah, like, you know, mannequin head severed and all that sort of stuff. And it was very much just like, oh, so something weird's happening in Orange County and like people need to pay attention to it. But then on the flip side, I did see, like you said, people reacting to it in a way where it was like, oh no, like this isn't the, you know, Jinko wearing jeans era, and like totally all of a sudden it started to not exist anymore, and like we're not ready for that.
Yeah, no, I feel like generally, you know, when you move into the Midwest and move back east and you're out on tour, like, no, they weren't ready for it. Because, you know, me and Hav were coloring our hair. Of course. Because it's what we did. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, we were going to school for that. That's like what we were going to do. Right. And are currently doing for our careers.
Right. You're so like, I've got all this dye. Like, so like, what is it?
Like, that's what we were into. Yeah. And like, you know, we liked the way some of these bands from San Diego were dressing.
Of course.
You know, the Locust.
Totally.
Like, they looked cool.
Unbroken.
Unbroken was sick.
Totally.
I liked the button-down shirts and, like, the high-watered, like, super tight
jeans. Yeah, exactly.
You know, hemmed pants and, like, the creepers. Yeah. And, you know, that stuff was, like, that's cool. So that's, like, what we were around. Like, that's what, like, the bands that we were going to see were kind of looking like. So it's, like,
it's a logical extension. Yeah,
totally. And like, you know, we're working in, you know, I guess like fashion retail, Banana Republic, me and Ken, and, you know, we're doing hair and like coloring our hair. So it's like, we put it all together, and, you know, a lot of people dug it. They were into it. Yeah. You know, you took it back east and they didn't get it so much. It took a lot longer.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Then, you know, kind of like you mentioned earlier, where it's like, as things became more serious, where it's like, you know, you guys signed to Epic, and, you know, there was, you know, national attention and touring. And once you became part of the, you know, music industry machine, you know, and you were relying on your band to make your living, did it ever for you kind of feel like out of control from that perspective? Or was it just like, oh wow, now this kind of feels like a job? Like, how was that all kind of sitting in your head as things were transpiring?
I mean, we at the time thought like we were really going to make it.
Sure.
Like, the amount of bullshit this label, specifically like the president of the label, was feeding us and feeding our A&R guy and feeding our management was like, it felt like it was going to happen for us. Like, we had like the material, like we had, you know, the fan base.
Sure.
So it wasn't something that they had to build from scratch, you know, and they completely went about marketing the band the wrong way, and utilizing what we had already given them properly, you know. And I think, you know, it was, God, it was, I mean, once the album was like starting to get released, and we kind of had to start playing ball with them,
sure,
and like play their game,
right?
That's when it started to feel like
it wasn't yours anymore.
Yeah.
Just
it wasn't. We had lost control, you know, from them choosing the first single, a song that we loved but didn't view as like the right first song to like introduce to our current fan base and a new fan base, and the format at radio that they were trying to market, just became a different thing. And then, you know, they relatively fixed the problem short term by kind of, they came out and saw the band. We were out on tour with Avenged Sevenfold, and they're like, oh, this is like a heavy band.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, cool. All right. Well, maybe like, you know, we had one woman in particular, Cheryl Valentine, at our
Mhm.
label that was like fighting for us and fighting for like the right single.
Right.
And they finally gave it to her, and like I feel like maybe she might have lost her job because of us, which sucks. But
Sure.
you know, she had that kind of passion about
Mhm.
our band and the album and the song and like what it should be and like what it wasn't at the time. And we were able to gain a lot of traction with that. But then, you know, we became at the top of the year a victim of like the reality of a major label.
Sure.
And like their quarterly projections and expenses, and we have $200,000 budgeted for a video for this song and we can't spend that, so we're gonna drop you. It's like not like the alternative, like, hey, we'll give you 10 grand.
Right.
It's like
You're like, we could use that. Right,
there was
right.
like no in between, and like, you know, because we were trying to like make a living, and because we were trying to like make touring easier, because we were trying to make our show better. We had spent a lot of money.
Yeah.
You know, like we had a big crew. We had, you know, some production on our show. We were
Sure.
on a bus, and, you know, we toured for so long and grinded it out that we wanted to be comfortable.
Of course.
And so we were taking more money than we were making for the label.
Right.
And, you know, eventually became, you know, a casualty of it all.
Right,
It just became a totally different vehicle.
Sure.
You know, and it just, having a bus was fun,
Of
and it was
course.
great.
Yeah.
And like there were some awesome times for
Right.
sure. Some great shows. Did some things and played some festivals and saw some bands that I never would have gotten to see or do or play.
Right.
But, you know, it lost its luster for sure.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, like you said, once it feels out of control, that's when you're just like, oh yeah, you start to go through the motions, and then you don't realize it until you're just like, oh yeah, like what did we just do? Like this feels weird. When you kind of transitioned out of touring life, and like you said, well, actually, like we joked about before we started recording, where you started to figure out your life and be like, well, what am I going to do now? Because I'm not, on the road, whatever, 200 days out of the year. Was that a tough transition for you, or was that like you just kind of flipped into survival mode in a way?
Yeah. So, after 18 Visions, I did, burn Halo for, a few years. And that started off very, very, it was a weird start. Like, got signed to a major label immediately.
Totally.
Made a big record, got a nice advance, got dropped from the label immediately.
Right.
Had to find a home for the album. Did that, and then it was off to a really, really nice start.
Sure.
It really was. And I was doing something that was like, fun for me. I was, tapping a different side of myself vocally and
Right.
musically that like I'd never gotten to do before. And the smart thing would have just been to start a new metalcore band and like, build off of like what 18 Visions had.
Of course.
But, I just completely went 180 and like really swung for the fences. I tasted a little bit of like what like real success in the industry could be like.
Sure.
With 18V. And so I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go for it. Like, I can't see myself doing anything else.
Right.
Like, so why not go for it? And so I did. And, it started off great. And then, the bumps in the road started coming.
Right.
And, it took, a few years. I think it was 2010.
Mm-hmm.
2012. The band I started to feel like was starting to like kind of work its way out of working.
Sure.
Yeah,
ran out of steam.
Yes. Yeah. Ran out of steam. The parts weren't there. And I was starting to like really stress out on the road with like what life for me was starting to look like.
Sure.
And I had kind of figured that like, I think it was like 2 months into like a 3.5 month tour that like, this is it for me.
Yeah.
And like,
I've reached my end.
Yes. And like, so when I get home, like I'm going to, settle my feet and like go find a job.
Right.
And start to work a career in hair.
Sure.
So
you'd always kind of done that, like when you came home from tours, right?
I did.
Just like had clients and you just,
Yep.
Okay.
And I'd always kind of had my hands in it. So I wasn't totally trying to relearn something like years later. And so, you know, I did that and struggled mightily, you know, like the bumps were like bigger and harder than what I was dealing with the band. And like, you know, my first paycheck was like $80.
Sure.
And God, I was just like, man, did I make the right decision? You know, this is just like,
what am I doing?
Yeah. What am I doing? Like, I'm in my early 30s. I'm making next to nothing.
Sure.
And like, this is tough, but you know, I stuck it out. I grinded it out.
Attention BetMGM customers. Have a friend who loves sports as much as you do. Here's a chance for the both of you to earn a $50 bonus when they sign up through BetMGM's Refer a Friend program. Just sign into your BetMGM account and click on the Refer a Friend program to send your friend a message inviting them to register a new account in the same state you use BetMGM in. Once your friend signs up and makes a deposit, they'll receive a $50 bonus. And once your friend places a bet with their bonus and the wager is settled, you'll receive a $50 bonus as well. Visit BetMGM.com for terms and conditions. 21 years of age or older to wager. New Jersey only. New and existing customer offer. All promotions are subject to qualification and eligibility requirements. Rewards issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets. Bonus bets expire in 30 days. Please, gamble responsibly. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
I'm Jason Alexander.
And I'm Peter Tillman.
And we know you've been pining for a brand new podcast hosted by an internationally beloved comedy superstar and television icon from the 90s.
Yeah, and I did talk radio for over 25 years in Los Angeles.
Well, come on, build yourself up a little. This reflects on me. Build it up.
What should I say?
Top-rated show. Come on, 5 days a week.
I was on 5 days a week. Pretty good show. Thousands of interviews.
Yeah, but shining star. You're a shining star. Say you're a shining star.
I'm a shining star. Yeah. You know what? I'll ignore all this because you actually told everybody the name of our podcast, which is
really.
Yeah.
It's an informative and funny show that seeks to answer the things that make Peter and I say, really? No, really?
That's right, Jason. We'll ask the question that everybody wants to know the answers to.
But we'll get answers that just may surprise you, inspire you, but will absolutely entertain you.
So join us. You'll laugh, you'll learn.
And me and the shining star over here might actually get paid.
It's Really No Really with Jason Alexander and Peter Tillman.
On the iHeartRadio app, on Apple Podcasts.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Where else would they get them?
During the summer of 2020, some Americans suspected that the FBI had secretly infiltrated the racial justice demonstrations. And you know what? They were right. I'm Trevor Aronson, and I'm hosting a new podcast series, Alphabet Boys.
As the FBI, sometimes you gotta grab the little guy to go after the big guy.
Each season will take you inside an undercover investigation. In the first season of Alphabet Boys, we're revealing how the FBI spied on protesters in Denver. At the center of this story is a raspy-voiced, cigar-smoking man who drives a silver hearse.
And inside this hearse was like a lot of guns.
He's a shark, and not in the good badass way. He's a nasty shark.
He was just waiting for me to set the date, the time, and then for sure he was trying to get it to happen.
Listen to Alphabet Boys on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Was there ever any, just because there's that weird feeling, especially like as just because you had played in a band for so long, the sort of, I don't have a better way to describe it other than sort of like, ego gratification of obviously getting in front of people and like having that sort of validation. Was there any of that playing itself inside your head?
No, not at all. Not even remotely.
That's cool.
The only thing that was tough was coming to grips with like not doing it anymore.
Right.
And I remember like I sat down with Keith one day and was like, hey dude, like how did you cope with not touring anymore?
Right.
And like not being in a band anymore?
Yeah.
Like, what did that look like for you? And he said it wasn't easy, but at the same time for him, like he's a guitar player, like writing music's gonna come easier to him than it is for me.
For you, yeah.
So he's got these like other outlets, and he's had these other outlets where he can create and like put out music and like maybe play a show or two and like have it be fun, right? Yep. I didn't have that. It was like kind of one of those all or nothing things for me. Right. And I would say was around January of 2013 that like my bandmates from Burn Halo had come down from Sacramento for NAMM, and they met with this like manager dude who I knew, and they wanted me to meet up with them and discuss like the band, which I was pretty much, I didn't say I quit, but like I had done nothing.
Totally.
Right. And like I was completely checked out.
Right.
And they're like, hey, we want to do this with you. And I was like, well, my career is like starting to pick up. Like I've worked hard over the last few months. I'm starting to build some steam. Like, I'm liking where I'm at. Like I got like a new girlfriend at home. Like,
there's stuff I'm excited about.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like, she's a normal girl. She doesn't know like what hardcore
I can't bring her into this weird stuff,
touring is like, or like, the music scene. Like she doesn't get it. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't want to thrust her into that. Like I like where I'm at. And, I tried to like pitch like them finding a replacement and like they weren't having it. So like it ended up boiling down to like, well, and me, I was all about like, I want to create, I want to write music, so it's like, okay, well, why don't I like write and record this album, or write this album for you at least, and, or like, maybe record it and like you'll find somebody else. Like, no, well, we want you. It's like, well, how about, I write and record this album, and then, I'll do what I can show wise. And like, they were cool with that. Well, it took a couple years for that album to come out. Right. Like at this point, like now I'm engaged to this girl that I was dating. And like now, actually I think I just got married actually when the album finally came out.
Sure.
And they wanted to like do all this touring, and I was, and like, now I'm like,
you're living your life, man.
Now I'm like working in a salon. I went from making $80 a week to like, now I like have an assistant that works with me, and I'm like double booking clients, and like I'm busy and like earning a living and like saving money for things and like going on vacations.
Yeah.
And,
you're
like,
doing adult stuff. Right.
Life is sick.
Yeah. Right.
And it was like, I can't. And so like I went out twice for 2 weeks at a time, and I was miserable. I hated it. Yeah. Like I was away from my job, which stressed me out.
Of course.
It's not like, I can work from the road. Yeah. Like, and I was getting a lot of new business. So if I'm not in the salon, A, I can't take my current clients, and B, I can't take new business. So I'm losing out on like continuing to build my career and like my foundation and my future. And so I'm taking a huge risk for like hardly any like, financial stability. And like now I've got a wife and a family to provide and provide for, and it's just not panning out for me. And, I came home, from a couple weeks, and like I think it was in December. I went out early December and basically, was transitioning to a different salon. So this is 2015, 2016. Sure. And I kind of got into it with our manager, and I was just like, you know what, fuck this. Like I'm over it.
This is
like,
dumb,
I'm over it. And so like that feeling I had gotten of like, struggling to like, man, I might never play music again. I might never write music again. That like kind of like saddened me. Like I didn't experience it this time.
Totally.
At all. Like
you realize you've grown past it.
I didn't go through that. Like I was checked out. I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Like this is my career. Like I have more important things to worry about.
Right.
Like if I write music again someday, cool. Like, but I'm never going to play in a band again.
Totally.
It's just not
in the cards.
No.
Right.
And like I was 100% accepting of it this time.
Yeah.
And like I was in such a great place, and then fucking Keith calls me up.
Man.
And like
hey, let's do this again. Right.
Keith calls me up a few months later. Is like, dude, like I got these songs. Like let's jam.
And you're like, oh well, all right. I guess I'll.
And I was like super stoked.
Yeah.
Because like, oh man, I haven't written music. In a few years. Like the stuff I wrote for the last Burn Halo album was written
years ago,
4 years ago.
Sure.
Because like it took a couple years to come out.
Totally.
I've got like my creative juices flowing, and like we tried working this 18V angle a couple of times. It just didn't happen.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting that this time at all. It was just like, hey, let's have fun and like write some music and put it out on some like indie label and like maybe play a show under like, some obscure band name.
Yeah.
And
it made sense to it all came together appropriately.
Yeah, totally.
There's two last things I want to hit on before I let you go was your spirituality, where it's like the notion that it's like 18 Visions, especially from like the first EP, was obviously very shrouded in satanic imagery and like that sort of the dark side of things. Whether or not like you personally espouse, that's a different story. But like from what I understand, like you had some sort of spiritual upbringing, whether it was Christianity or that existed in your household, and you kind of, I guess, ebbed and flowed through that as your life went along. Like how did that journey go for you?
Yeah, man. I just wasn't into it. I got pulled away from like baseball to go to like Catholic, like after school stuff. Sure. Like, and just like right off the bat, I was just like, man, this is stupid. Like I'm not into it. It sucks, right? And then struggling with like, my parents' divorce and dealing with that. I was just like, you know what, like there's no God, or if there is, like, like fuck him.
Yeah, he doesn't have my back,
for putting me in the situation. Totally. And like angry ass kid, you know, and with reason to be so. And gosh, I think, this is when I was dating Nick's sister.
Oh, okay.
And who was raised.
She was, yeah.
Like going to Orange Lutheran.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, super nice girl, super cool. I was, gothed out to the max.
Of course,
like,
totally.
And so sad and depressed.
Right.
I mean, not really, but I was just angry, like
of course, right.
at like this, the universe, God, whatever.
Sure.
And I started reading the Satanic Bible.
Sure.
And it was like 1999, and like the whole Y2K, end of the world, Illuminati prophecies, and like me and my friends were like in it.
Right.
Like we were like heavily like into that stuff.
Sure.
God. There was a situation, like me and my friends were hanging out, and we were at my buddy's house, and we like, somebody had all this like Y2K, like Illuminati, like propaganda. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And like we were like reading about all this stuff, and then we're like, oh, let's go look out for like, let's go out and like look for like some Freemason stuff. And like we were just like, just doing like what like 19-year-old
of course
kids do, and so we're like out and about, and then we go to like what we called like the Satanic Park, or like the Devil's Playground that's over by South Coast Plaza.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about, right?
And like, have you been up there? And like, you look at it, and like it clearly spells out Satan,
exactly,
right?
Yeah.
And it is in the form of a rattlesnake,
exactly.
Like in. So like, oh, this shit is so dark and it's so cool, right?
Middle of Orange County,
and like 18V was like never meant to like be about like Satanism, it was just like fun, like evil, dark.
Of course, it's
stuff,
more about the aesthetic than the actual belief, right?
Right. And so, we get back to my buddy's house, and like we're reading more of this stuff, and we turn the TV on, and like we kind of walk away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're like in the kitchen snacking around, and then we're like, we sit down, we're like just rapping out, and all of a sudden we hear the word Illuminati come from the TV. This is like trippy. Like this is like I guess kind of like my testimony of like getting away from like this is my testimony of like believing that there is like a God.
Sure.
And we all kind of like look up at each other, and we're just like, what the fuck? Like, what is like weird? And like the whole movie turns out to be about like satanic witchcraft.
Okay.
And like these like rituals that they're performing, and we're just reading about some of these same rituals that like you have to perform to get your 33rd degree Freemasonry, whatever. I don't even know if that's real, but that's what we read.
That's what you were reading, right?
Totally. And so my buddy's like, oh, I'm going to switch this. And he goes like under his TV, and he pulls out from his TV stand a box, like just like a brown box. Mm-hmm. And there's like VHS tapes in it, because that's what you watched back then was VHS.
Yeah.
And so he's like looking, and like I'm like kind of like browsing over, and like there's some numbers on the box, and like this could be purely coincidental, but like given everything that's happened right. and like what I'll get to as like the really like kind of like hit me over the head moment was like there's like 7 numbers on this like, or 5 to 7 numbers on this like box, right? And right in the middle of these numbers is 666. And I see that and I kind of like freeze up and like I feel this chill. Like I'll never forget it because it's just like, it's just so vivid. It will always just be so like implanted, embedded, ingrained in me.
Sure.
And like I kind of freeze up, right? And I'm just like, wow, like that's so trippy. Like all this stuff is like happening.
It's
like
adding up, right?
Right. And so I go home and like I call my girlfriend and I'm like, and she knew I was reading the Satanic Bible at the time too. Right. She's like, don't.
What are you messing with that for?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I tell her like everything I just said, right? But probably in more detail because it had just happened.
Totally.
And she's like, you know what? I prayed 3 days ago that God would show you a sign that the devil is real.
Oh, jeez. And then just like, what?
Right. And like, so for me, like, you know, for me trying to process this.
Yeah, that's a lot to take in one evening.
All the stuff that we're meddling with, that I'm meddling with. And then like, you know, the book that I'm reading and like going out to this satanic park or whatever.
Yeah.
And then the movie that was on, and then the box, the numbers on the box, and then I mean this can sound crazy to you guys. I don't really care.
No,
but this is like what I went through, and like this is what I dealt with, and this is like what got me from, you know, this is kind of like what pulled me out of it. And then the fact that she said that to me,
absolutely,
like, you know, that she like really did that, and
plain as day.
Yeah, I was like, dude, there's no way this can be a coincidence. This is like divine intervention.
Totally.
Which is an awesome fucking Slayer album,
a great
too.
reference. Totally. But yeah, just, I mean, people don't arrive to conclusions, you know, sometimes it's in dramatic fashion as you have, or sometimes it's like something gradual, but it's like the moment where you're able to feel like something is actually your own, where it's like something is tangible to you. That's when like the switch flips, where you're just like, oh yeah, this thing's like, whatever this thing is, like, I have no fucking clue, but like, I know that this is not real or whatever, you know?
Yeah. So, I mean, that basically like made me realize that there is in this world, like there is a good and there is an evil.
Sure.
And it brought me to terms with there is a God and there is a devil.
Right.
And, you know, people can take that and apply it to their lives in the way that they want it to, or not apply it to their lives at all. But it just kind of opened my eyes up to that.
Right.
And, you know, since that day, like, you know, I still believe.
Yep.
I also believe that, like, you know, get into a little bit that, you know, nobody's perfect.
Of course.
You know, I've struggled and like grappled with, you know, my faith and my belief like since that day, and will probably continue to do so for the rest of my life.
Of course.
That's just, you know, I feel like a part of humanity.
Yep.
But, you know, it's opened up my eyes to a lot in the way that I view the world and the way that I view people.
Sure.
It opened me up to like forgiving people.
Right.
You know, and friends that like I had huge fallings out with, that like I literally have gotten in fist fights with because, you know, just beef or whatever, you know, being able to circle back around and like, hey, maybe I wasn't at fault for that, but like, you know what, like, hey, you know, I'm sorry for how that went down and
how I acted
that happened.
Or whatever. Yeah,
like, you know, so it brought a kindness out of me, I guess you could say, that, you know, I definitely didn't have before. It's just, I might have been like, you know, chill amongst my friends, but like, you know, definitely didn't have that like go out of my way, like big picture type of thing.
Right. I'm a big fan of humanity in general, right? It's like, you're like, nah, I'm sticking to my friends. Everyone else is.
Yeah. Humanity's pretty.
Humanity is the devil, as integrity says.
Dude, it really is. Truly is. Truly, especially today.
Yes. Well, but I mean, I really appreciate you walking me through that, just because I knew bits and pieces of that story, but I didn't know the full grasp of it. So that's very cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's that in a nutshell.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. The last thing I want to hit on was just the, like you mentioned, obviously, since 18 Visions is now, this is a phrase that I like to use, a full-time, part-time band.
Yep.
Because that's exactly what you are.
Totally.
Where, you're open to opportunities and putting out new music and all that sort of stuff, but, you're not going to be on the road 200 days out of the year. What have you noticed since, you've always been obviously still active in music from going to shows and still caring about, music in general. But like, what have you noticed in regards to people reacting to 18 Visions, whether it was like, wow, like a 15-year-old kid's at her show that like clearly had never would have seen us. Like, how is that like, or I guess, what have you recognized as being stuff that you might not have expected as you dove back in?
I mean, first of all, the reception.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
It
like
does.
When we first started talking about doing this and like legit doing it, like touring was never an option.
Right.
Like it just wasn't.
Not
and
at
like when we got that out of the way and like what we all wanted from it.
Sure.
And the expectations, it was like, okay, cool. We can actually make this happen.
Yeah.
Touring's just, I mean,
you'll play some shows. That's it.
Yeah, totally. Let's have fun with it. We just wanted it to be fun.
Yeah.
Or
you want to play places where it's like, hey, I know that shows will be fun here.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we want to play in front of 5 people? It's like, well, no, like we're not having fun. The 5 people that are there may not be having fun as well. It's like, you don't need that.
No, not at all. And I think just to get the whole touring thing out of the way, like the big reunion tour, like that's a lot of pressure.
It is.
And we didn't want that at all.
Right.
Like, I mean, what if it sucks?
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like this show at the observatory that we played, like that was, I mean, it wasn't a ton of pressure, but we were just like, oh, gosh, man, I hope like this room is half full.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a big room.
It is a big room.
We put a lot of like trust and faith in Biggie.
Yeah.
To be like, hey, like,
we can play Chain Reaction, right?
Yeah. Which is what you
wanted to do,
right? It's safe.
It is, of course.
But I mean, we've never been a safe band.
No.
So, the reception. We were just going to put out like an EP,
right?
Probably by ourselves,
sure.
And like maybe people would like it.
Just float it out there, yeah.
And we create an Instagram and throw one subliminal thing out, and then it's just like the floodgates open,
right?
And then it's like, all right, maybe you guys need a bigger platform for the music. It'll make it easier on you. No financial commitment for you guys out of pocket.
Of course,
they'll take care of everything. Well, we don't want to tour. No, it won't be an issue. It won't be an issue. Cool. It's still not an issue. Right. So it's like the whole time we just want to have fun. We want to do rad shit and like continue to put out music. And, the reception's been awesome. So I think that was like something we didn't expect. And then to like, the feedback from the show or feedback from fans that are going to see us at future shows. Like,
sure.
I got into you guys. I found you right when you broke up or right before you broke up or right after you broke up. Never got a chance to see you. That's awesome.
Right.
Or like, even younger kids that are like getting exposed to like, the hardcore scene.
Totally.
And like somehow they get shown, an old 18V album or like Tower of Snakes is kind of like I guess like a song that people cover.
Totally.
In bands, which is just insane to me.
Totally.
But, like, this band played Tower Snakes and I found out it was you guys and totally turned me on to you.
Right.
Like, that's just rad.
Yeah.
Like, that rules. So the fact that, like, there's, like, even young kids out there that, like, maybe can, like, start to grow with the band and wherever it goes from here, or, is able to like sit down with an 18V catalog from start to finish and like see the progression and like understand the progression.
Sure.
and not have like an emotional attachment to the band to where like they're put off by the transition from like Until the Ink to Vanity.
Sure.
Or from Vanity to Obsession or from Obsession to the self-titled. They're not, they don't have like this emotional attachment to some of these albums where
Totally.
like they want
They're just
more
consuming
of
it as
that.
music, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And so like that's rad to be able to like, hopefully have fans that can do that.
Right.
Yeah. And like take every piece of music for what it was at the time.
Yeah. No, that's super cool. I mean, it's like you said, I think ultimately the biggest thing is just like it's no pressure. It's existing in a fun place, which in turn will put you and everybody else that you're creating with in a good space to be able to create more music and still exist in this world, as opposed to just like, oh yeah, we got to get this thing and do this whole big. It's like, yeah, that's just you can do that once maybe, and then like you said, the pressure would probably collide in itself.
Yeah, totally. I mean, fun and easy. That's what this has been from day one.
Yeah.
From like writing music to playing the show to playing the upcoming shows that we have, and it's just hopefully there's more of that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think we've done a good job so far of creating a world where we can exist within that world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's going out and playing 1 weekend a month or 2 weekends a month or once every couple of months. Like
Totally.
we can do that. We can make it happen. They can be fun, but successful at the same time.
Exactly.
And like, keep driving us to
And
want more.
it's ultimately manageable.
100%. Right. Yeah.
Well, James, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you hanging out.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that was James. And thank you very much for coming to hang out at my house and chop it up. I appreciated it. It was definitely, it's always weird when I, do these conversations face to face because sometimes you've been talking about really intense stuff for like, 30, 40, sometimes an hour. And 30, 40 minutes, by the way. I just realized that I didn't finish that thought. I have a tendency to do that. But anyways, and then to like disconnect and be like, well, thanks for that. It's like, well, okay. Are you okay? Am I okay? But yeah, and what we got next week, because that's also why you tune into these outros in order to hear what's happening. Next week is another rad guest, Jimmy Lavelle. He played in Tristeza, and he also played in Album Leaf. He also played in some great San Diego hardcore bands like Guyver One and The Locust. And he's been a person I've kind of had earmarked for quite some time to be on the show because, I've worshipped at his altar musically for quite some time. So we get into some really, really fun conversations. So that is next week. And until then, please be safe, everybody. And please, please, please visit my friends at Mubi.com/words, and you'll be able to get a 30-day trial. Please, you'll love this service. The movies they have on there are spectacular. All right. Talk to you later.
You've been listening to the Jabberjaw Podcast Network, jabberjawmedia.com. Shh.
Hi, I'm Esther Dean. I've made my life by writing songs like Fireworks by Katy Perry, Super Bass by Nicki Minaj, What's My Name by Rihanna, just to name a few. And now I'm having an absolute blast sharing some of the knowledge that I've learned with upcoming songwriters on Songland on NBC. I'm excited to welcome you to a brand new season of Songland and Songland's podcast, giving you new insight into the magical art of songwriting, as told by some of the best in the business, and also the pioneers and the up-and-comers who will be shaping the hits you'll be listening to for years. We have an amazing roster of talent this season. I promise you don't want to miss one single episode. Don't miss Songland, Monday nights at 10/9 Central, and join us here on Songland's podcast, available every week after the show on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Fans of the hit TV show Scandal can now revisit every episode on Unpacking the Toolbox, a Scandal Rewatch podcast. Hosted by the cast members behind Quinn Perkins and Huck. So, gladiators, grab some Gettysburger and relive Scandal's most iconic OMG moments.
We would be in like 110 degrees in a wool coat.
Yep.
I mean, the chafing that was going on in my pencil skirts, I deserve all the acting awards, people.
Listen to Unpacking the Toolbox, a Scandal rewatch podcast on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Did you know Lance Bass is a Russian-trained astronaut? That he went through training in a secret facility outside Moscow, hoping to become the youngest person to go to space? Well, I ought to know, because I'm Lance Bass. And I'm hosting a new podcast that tells my crazy story and an even crazier story about a Russian astronaut who found himself stuck in space with no country to bring him down. With the Soviet Union collapsing around him, he orbited the Earth for 313 days that changed the world. Listen to The Last Soviet on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.